He was voted the greatest guitarist in the world, beating Eric Clapton. He turned down the Rolling Stones. He played Belfast during the height of the Troubles, when every other rock act stayed home. But America barely knew his name. He built one of the most ferocious guitar sounds in rock history, then watched the industry move on without him. Not because he failed, but because he refused to play their game. This is the rise and fall of Rory Gallagher. The story of Rory Gallagher did not begin in a recording studio or a record label boardroom. It began in a place the music industry had completely forgotten, Ballyshannon, County Donegal, where William Rory Gallagher was born on March 2nd, 1948. His father Daniel played the accordion. His mother Monica sang and acted in local productions. Music was in the house from the start. But the specific obsession that would define Rory's entire life came from somewhere else. From the crackling late-night frequencies of Radio Luxembourg and the American Forces Network, which carried across the Irish Sea like messages from another world. While other kids in Cork were chasing the pop sounds of the day, Rory was doing something different. He was digging deep into Muddy Waters, deep into Lead Belly and Big Bill Broonzy and Woody Guthrie. He was a self-taught musician who began on a ukulele before graduating to a beat-up acoustic guitar at age 9. He stayed up late into the night, straining to hear Jazz Hour broadcasts and Chris Barber's BBC program, which introduced him to Sister Rosetta Tharpe. This was not a casual hobby. This was a calling. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. The defining moment came in 1963, when 15-year-old Rory convinced his mother to help him purchase a 1961 Fender Stratocaster from Crowley's Music Store in Cork. The guitar, a Sunburst model originally ordered for a show band musician who decided he wanted a red one instead, cost £100. In 1960s Ireland, that was a staggering sum for a teenage boy. He bought it on an installment plan. He never let it go. That guitar became the companion of his life. Over decades of relentless performance, its paint was not worn away by time. It was stripped down by the acidic chemistry of Rory Gallagher's own sweat. Every scratch, every chip, every strip patch of sunburst lacquer was a record of the work he put in. He entered the professional world through the Irish show band circuit, joining the Fontana Show Band at the age of 15. The show band's required uniforms matched choreography and hit songs designed for ballroom dancing. Rory wore the uniform, but he could not stop himself from injecting the blues wherever he found an opening. Before long, he was moving toward the stripped-down power trio sound that would define his career. It was his first act of defiance, and it would not be his last. In 1966, Rory Gallagher formed a band called Taste. It was a power trio, guitar, bass, drums, built in the image of the music he loved most. Raw, unpolished, emotionally direct. The band established a residency at the Maritime Hotel in Belfast, where audiences experienced something they had never quite encountered before. Rory's solos were not just technically impressive, they were almost spiritual events, long, improvisational, restless. He took the music somewhere and left you there, changed. The band moved to London in 1968, coming under the management of a Belfast promoter named Eddie Kennedy. Kennedy saw commercial potential, but felt the original rhythm section lacked the professional edge for the international stage. Under pressure, Rory replaced his bandmates with drummer John Wilson and bassist Richard McCracken. The new lineup of Taste became something formidable, a unit capable of matching the volcanic intensity of the British blues rock scene at its most ferocious. The results were immediate. John Lennon praised them publicly. Eric Clapton took notice. Their 1970 album On the Boards reached number 18 on the UK charts, and their live performances earned comparisons to the most explosive acts in the world. Then came the Isle of Wight Festival in August 1970. The crowd was enormous, and Taste delivered a performance that became part of rock folklore. They were called back for multiple encores, and the set helped cement their reputation as one of the most intense live bands of the era. In a field packed with major names, including The Doors, Joni Mitchell, and Jimi Hendrix, Taste was the underground hero that broke through without compromising a single note. But success at that scale exposed the cracks. Their manager, Eddie Kennedy, had constructed a financial arrangement that left the band living in a bedsit in Earl's Court, traveling in a battered Ford Transit, and earning very little while the operation around them generated real money. Kennedy isolated Rory from his bandmates, planting seeds of suspicion about who was getting what. By the end of 1970, a band that had played to huge crowds was tearing itself apart backstage.
Let's ask permission when you really want to blink.
The final performance came on New Year's Eve at Queen's University in Belfast. The acrimony was complete. Taste was over. What came next defined the rest of Rory Gallagher's life. Most musicians, staring at the wreckage of a band that had just played the Isle of Wight festival, would have done anything to hold on. They would have compromised, restructured, found a new singer, a new name, a new arrangement with the label. They would have done whatever the industry asked. Rory Gallagher walked away. The decision was not made from a position of strength. He was entangled in the restrictive contracts Eddie Kennedy had constructed, agreements that left him financially exposed and legally tangled. It took outside help to straighten out the situation, and the experience left Rory with a permanent distrust of people who claimed to have the artist's best interests at heart. From that point forward, he made one of the most consequential decisions of his career. He appointed his brother Donal as his manager, not because Donal had industry connections or negotiating leverage, but because Rory needed someone he could trust completely. In an industry full of people who viewed musicians as commodities, Rory chose loyalty over strategy. He formed a new trio, bass player Jerry McAvoy, drummer Wilgar Campbell, and released his self-titled solo debut in May 1971. It reached number 32 on the UK charts. His second album, Deuce, arrived later that year and became a strong success. Then, in 1972, Live in Europe cracked the UK top 10. He had done it, on his own terms. Without a management empire, without a calculated commercial pivot, without sacrificing the raw blues rock sound that had been his identity since he was a teenager in Cork, straining to hear Muddy Waters through a valve radio. For the audience watching from the sidelines, this was the moment that defined Rory Gallagher as something different. This was not a band story, this was a value story. He had chosen artistic purity over an easier path, and the music had rewarded him. The question was whether the industry would do the same. It would not. By the mid-1970s, Rory Gallagher had become something extraordinary, a live phenomenon whose reputation among fellow musicians stood completely at odds with his commercial profile. In 1972, Melody Maker readers voted him Guitarist of the Year. The winner was not Eric Clapton. It was not Jimmy Page. It was Rory Gallagher, a man from Cork, playing blues rock out of an independent operation, who had never had a top 10 single in his life. When informed of the result, Clapton himself reportedly called it well-deserved. Rory played more than 2,000 concerts during his career. He was known for long, exhausting shows and for giving everything he had on stage. He wore the same clothes on stage that he wore off it. The flannel shirts, the blue jeans, the battered Stratocaster that looked like it had been dragged across a decade of highways. There was no image. There was only the music. The peak of his European reputation arrived with the Irish tour of 1974. Northern Ireland was living through the Troubles, and many major touring acts avoided the region. Rory refused to stay away. He saw himself as a music warrior, someone whose obligation to his audience outweighed the personal risk. When he walked onto the stage at the Ulster Hall in Belfast in January 1974, the crowd erupted with peace signs and outstretched hands. Director Tony Palmer captured the moment on film for the documentary Irish Tour 74. It became one of the most powerful images of rock and roll as a force for human connection ever committed to celluloid. In Europe, in Germany, in France, in the Netherlands, he was a superstar. The audiences knew every note. The concerts were religious in their intensity. In America, it was a different story. He toured the United States repeatedly, opening for acts like Deep Purple, Fleetwood Mac, and Rush. But without radio support, without a hit single, without an image that fit the glam rock or arena rock aesthetics of the era, the American mainstream never fully embraced him. Brian May called him a magician. Slash described him as a total purist. He laid the road for everyone in music in Ireland. These were the testimonials of people who had built careers on stages far bigger than Rory's, and every one of them pointed to him as the source. He was the guitarist's guitarist, revered by the people the public worshipped, and largely unknown to the public itself. In January 1975, the Rolling Stones found themselves in crisis. Mick Taylor had departed, and the band needed a new guitarist. They invited Rory Gallagher to Rotterdam to jam with them. He spent 3 days playing with the band. By the accounts of those present, the sessions were extraordinary. Rory fit into the music with the ease of someone who had been in the band for years. But there was a problem. The Rolling Stones were in a state of internal collapse. Mick Jagger and Keith Richards were barely communicating. Richards was frequently unreachable during the sessions, present in body, but absent in every other sense. Rory needed a decision. He had his own tour of Japan beginning the next morning. He spent the night checking on Richards every half hour, waiting for a definitive answer. None came. In the early hours of the morning, Rory Gallagher packed his guitar, left a note, and caught his flight to Tokyo. He had been offered a chance to step into the orbit of the most famous rock band on Earth. He walked away because his own commitments mattered more, because the musicians waiting for him in Japan mattered more, because waiting around for Keith Richards to wake up was not the way Rory Gallagher operated. It was either the most principled decision of his life or the most costly one, probably both. What is certain is that it was entirely consistent with every other choice he had ever made.
It's gonna rain, brother. It's gonna rain hard.
As the 1970s gave way to the 1980s, the rock landscape shifted beneath Rory Gallagher's feet, and he refused to move with it. Glam rock, arena rock, new wave, the slick synthesizer-driven production of the early MTV era. One by one, the pillars of the music industry reorganized themselves around image, around radio formatting, around the kind of commercial calculation that had always been antithetical to everything Rory stood for. Other guitar heroes adapted. Some reinvented themselves entirely. Rory doubled down. In 1976, Gallagher released Calling Card, produced by Deep Purple's Roger Glover. Rory later felt the album's sound was too polished and had parts of it reworked to bring back some of the edge he wanted. Later, in San Francisco, he set aside a completed album with producer Elliot Mazur after deciding the material should be handled differently. He chose purity over product every time. By the early 1980s, his releases appeared on his own label, giving him more control and moving him further away from the commercial machinery of the major labels. He released Jinx in 1982, Defender in 1987. The albums were honest, carefully crafted, and largely invisible to mainstream radio. The new generation of guitar heroes, Slash, Johnny Marr, The Edge, cited him as a primary influence in interviews. Meanwhile, the magazines that had voted him Guitarist of the Year in 1972 had moved on to the next thing, and the next. Rory Gallagher was still making music that mattered. The industry had simply stopped paying attention. He had not changed. The world around him had. And the cost of staying consistent in a business built on reinvention was a kind of slow, quiet disappearance from the cultural narrative he had helped write. By the late 1980s, the weight of the road, and of everything the road had required him to suppress, began to show on Rory Gallagher in ways that could not be ignored. He had always been shy off stage, reserved, polite, almost self-effacing. But the grinding isolation of decades of touring, the lack of mainstream recognition despite extraordinary peer respect, and a fear of flying had quietly combined into something more serious. To manage the anxiety of travel and the rigors of constant performance, Rory had turned to prescription sedatives and alcohol. By the early 1990s, the physical toll was visible. The lean, animated performer, who had demolished stages across Europe for 20 years, had become visibly unwell, in part because of the medications used to keep him on the road. He retreated increasingly to London hotel rooms, identifying with the solitary figures of the noir detective fiction he loved. He continued to tour. He continued to record. He released Fresh Evidence in 1990, an album that contained some of his most melancholic songwriting, but the machinery of his body was failing. His bandmates and crew noticed the change. During what would be one of his final tours, those closest to him described him as unrecognizable from the man who had walked onto the Isle of Wight stage 2 decades before. Something essential had dimmed, and yet, he never complained publicly. He never blamed the industry. He never gave an interview full of bitterness about the recognition he had been denied. He continued to honor his commitments to his audiences with the same dedication he had shown since the Fontana Show Band played ballrooms in Cork. That was who Rory Gallagher was, down to the marrow. In January 1995, during a short tour of the Netherlands, Rory Gallagher collapsed. He was admitted to King's College Hospital in London, where the full extent of the damage became clear. His liver was failing, the result of years of alcohol use combined with the destructive effect of his medications. A liver transplant was performed in March 1995. For a brief, fragile period, it appeared he might recover, but his immune system had been exhausted by decades of physical and mental strain. He contracted a hospital-acquired infection in the intensive care unit. On June 14, 1995, Rory Gallagher died at the age of 47. Eric Clapton said he was a wonderful player. Jimmy Page acknowledged the tragedy of his passing. Bono of U2 called him one of the top 10 guitar players of all time, and one of the top 10 good guys. The guitar, the 1961 Fender Stratocaster, purchased on an installment plan by a 15-year-old boy in Cork, remained in the care of his brother Donal for nearly 30 years. In October 2024, it was put up for auction. It sold for £889,000, and the buyer later arranged for it to remain in Ireland. It is now part of the National Museum of Ireland's collection. Brian May called him a magician. Johnny Marr said he changed his musical life. The statue honoring Gallagher stands in Ballyshannon, and his influence still circles back through the generations of players who cite him as the reason they picked up a guitar in the first place. The question Rory Gallagher's life poses is not whether he was good enough. Every musician who ever heard him play answered that question immediately. The question is what we do with the people who refuse to compromise, whether we see them clearly while they are still here. Rory Gallagher never made the commercial compromises the industry demanded. He never chased the hit, never changed the image, never stopped playing exactly what he believed in. And for that, the machine largely passed him by. But the music remained, the guitar remained, and the men who built careers on the stages he never quite reached still point back to him as the reason they picked up a guitar in the first place. That is not obscurity, that is immortality. Do you remember the first time you heard Rory Gallagher? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe for more of rock's greatest untold stories.